AMD just reported earnings and the stock is up over 4% as I am recording today's episode. Now, for this quick video, what we're going to do is just take a closer look at some of the numbers that came out. Now, later today, I will do more of a deep dive on the earnings call because we do get a lot of great commentary, but the numbers are also crucial. So let's start off with today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so first, let's just quickly look at what the market was expecting. So overall revenue was expected to be roughly $7.1 billion and earnings per share were expected to be about 93 cents. Now, if we look at the actual numbers that AMD provided, they actually did beat across the map. Revenue was $7.4 billion, about a $300 million beat of what the market was expecting. And we can see earnings per share were 96 cents. Again, much higher than the market was expecting by about 3 cents. Now, this is obviously very bullish and very great. I mean, we saw gross margins up as well. Now, I do believe the market was expecting some strong numbers for AMD, but I think what really surprised the space right now was the overall guidance. So for quarter two, the company gave us a growth of $7.4 billion plus or minus $300 million. Now, this is a sequential increase compared to the number that we get on the top end, and the market was expecting around 7.2 billion. Now, the reason this is bullish and why the market was excited were two things, in my opinion. First, Intel recently reported earnings, and Intel, unfortunately, for their guidance, they talked a lot about macroeconomic headwinds, about tariff headwinds, and how that might kind of create maybe a weaker second quarter and the second half of the year. So AMD is kind of saying maybe we're not seeing that right now. So I think that was the first reason. The second reason is, for those that are not familiar, AMD just recently got hit with some export restrictions in the AI GPU side to China, and they did make a nice amount of revenue in that segment from their AI chips. So investors and maybe analysts were not expecting too much growth because of the weakness in that space. Now, AMD again kind of says that even with these export restrictions, we are still expected to grow. Now, if we kind of look at some of the market numbers, their data center segment grew 57% year over year, driven by both their CPU and GPU sales. Their client segment was up 68% year over year, primarily driven from their latest AMD Ryzen processor, the Zen 5. So here's where they're taking that market share from Intel. Gaming revenue was down roughly 30%, mainly driven by the decrease in semi-custom revenue. Right now, there's no new generation that is using, or console that is using AMD's chips in like this RAM process, right? The PS5 and the Xbox, whatever we're at, have already been out for a few years. So it's not like a massive demand for those. Now, the other thing, the embedded segment was $823 million, down 3% year over year. This is a segment that has still been weak, but at least down 3% year over year kind of showcases that the bottom is really kind of here, even with some of these macroeconomic pressures. Now, some things to kind of take a note of is AMD did close their acquisition of CT System, and this is a way that they're going to do to kind of create moving into that leadership system and rack level expertise. There might be some investors that think AMD is entering into the server space. That's not necessarily what's happening. They just need to kind of engineer how to build servers a lot faster. Now, I want to go and look at the slide really quick, but first, if you haven't, make sure to check out my daily semiconductor newsletter, whatthechiphappened.com. I will be covering AMD and other earnings there for free tonight. So make sure to check that out at whatthechiphappened.com. Now, there was something else that got me pretty excited. I mean, I've been covering AMD for such a long time, many years. I want to say we're 2025, maybe at least over 5 years. I've been looking and reading these reports. This is one of the first time they've actually changed the colors of their presentation. I don't know why I'm liking it a lot right now. These are the colors, I believe, of kind of like their MI300 line and the colors that they use when they showcase that. So pretty cool numbers here. Now, the company, again, we were looking looking at the guidance of about 7.4 billion plus or minus 300 million. And like I mentioned, they did get hit with inventory charge due to export restrictions. That inventory charge was about $800 million, and that was gross margins. That brings the gross margins down to 43%. Now they mentioned if you kind of exclude this, the gross margins is 54%. Now I don't think this is half bad. Obviously, a lot of people like to compare it to Nvidia, with Nvidia having gross margins of 70 plus percent. I want to say in a company that's maybe more focused in the hardware space, as AMD really is at the moment, 54% is pretty damn good. Now, as an investor, one thing that also really caught my attention was the change in balance sheet. Remember, this company just made a huge acquisition, and that acquisition is definitely kind of moving around the ratio of cash to debt. So in quarter four, just last quarter, they had about $5 billion in revenue and about $1.8 billion in debt. Now, with the recent acquisition, they have about $7.3 billion in cash and about $4 billion in debt. Even if they kind of use that cash to, let's say they drop that down by $2 billion, this would go down to about $2 billion. Actually, it's actually not that bad in my opinion of change here. So the company is planning on selling some parts of the CT acquisition. So to be honest, it seems like even with this acquisition, things don't look that bad. And it isn't that major hit in inventory, because you kind of reduce the amount of cash here and bring it back down to normal levels. You would almost get back to normal levels here in total debt. And now you kind of have that acquisition coming through. Overall, all their segments are pretty strong. They still determined that the data center market is going to be one of their biggest markets and still massively grown. I mean, we can see net revenue for data center was up 57%, while operating income was up 72%. So nothing too crazy here from the slide. I believe that we're going to get more information during the earnings call, so stay tuned. But here we can see that the manufacturing divestiture of their progress for CT System is moving pretty along. They received significant interest to acquire CT Systems US-based manufacturing business. And I think they're going to sell it pretty good, and it's going to help them increase and improve that balance sheet overall. The final thing I want to mention is just a commentary from Lisa Su. She mentions that we delivered an astounding start to 2025 as year-over-year growth accelerated for the fourth consecutive quarter, driven by strength in their core business and expanding data centers and AI momentum. They also mentioned that despite the dynamic macro and regulatory environment, our first quarter results and second quarter outlook highlight the strength of our differentiated product portfolio and consistent execution, positioning us well for strong growth in 2025. So this is kind of like a different story from Intel. Let me kind of just right now see how the stocks are doing. AMD is still up over 4.8%, but I am curious to see what Intel stock is doing. Intel stock is pretty much flat. I would have expected maybe a small drop here after such strong numbers from AMD. AMD kind of here just ended up saying, hey, look, Intel might be saying that they're seeing a lot of headwinds in this environment. Because we're so well diversified, we don't see that same thing, and we're definitely a better play than Intel. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.